Have you checked the labels on your food lately? They're getting scarier and scarier. What's the solution? Everything's better when you make it from scratch. Do it yourself with ingredients you trust. Hey guys, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. Welcome to the channel. I am so glad you're here today. Today's video is a meal in a jar. This whole month of March, there has been a meal in a jar collaboration going on here on YouTube called Emergency 24. So there have been a whole month's worth of meal in a jar recipes, and today, the last day of the month, I'm wrapping it up with a chicken a la king meal in a jar. This one is by special request from a member of my meal in a jar group on Facebook. Chicken a la king is a classic chicken dish with chicken and veggies in a creamy gravy made with milk or cream and chicken broth. She asked specifically for the Betty Crocker chicken a la king recipe, so I based it on that recipe, but there are many different versions of chicken a la king. The Betty Crocker recipe contains mushrooms, pimento, and green bell pepper. The mushrooms and pimento are pretty standard, but some other variations use celery or green peas or other vegetables in place of the green peppers. This is a very saucy dish. It's usually served over something like rice or noodles, toast points, biscuits, or puff pastry shells. Before I get started on the recipe, I do want to say thank you to the hosts of this emergency collaboration, Natasha from the Budget Preppers and Tanya from Low Family Adventures. Thank you for all of the hard work that you've done putting this together. I also want to thank all the companies who donated prizes for the collab. There are some amazing prizes that you can enter to win just by watching all these amazing videos and leaving a comment under each video by April 6, 2024, when the drawing will be held. A little bit later in the video, I'm going to go over some of the amazing prizes and exactly how the drawing will work, so stay tuned for more info on that. For now, let's get right into the recipe and how to put together this chicken a la king, shelf-stable, just add water meal in a jar. For this meal, I'm going to be using a wide mouth quart jar. Now, with a quart jar, these meals usually serve about 3 to 4 people. Of course, that's going to depend on things like what the meal is, what you're serving alongside of it, and how big your family's appetites are. But typically, a quart-sized jar will, the meal will serve 3 to 4 people. So if you have less people to serve, some people like to cut these in half and put them in a pint jar. I'm also going to be using my canning funnel just to make this a little bit easier. And I'm going to start by adding some chicken. I'm using chicken slices. This is my favorite freeze-dried chicken, and it's been on sale this month, so I've stocked up. But you can use any form of freeze-dried chicken that you have, whether it's some that you purchased or some that you freeze-dried yourself. So I'm going to be using a cup of the chicken, freeze-dried chicken. And next I'm going to go ahead and add some of my sauce ingredients because they're powders and they will filter down among the chicken. I'm going to start with some butter powder. I'm using 2 tablespoons of the butter powder, which is the same as 1/8 of a cup. So 2 tablespoons of butter powder. Next, I'm using some instant milk powder. I'm using 4.5 tablespoons. So 4 tablespoons is the same as a 1/4 cup. So I'm going to go ahead and use a 1/4 cup and then another 1/2 tablespoon. Next, I'm using some chicken bouillon. I'm going to use 1.5 teaspoons. And use whatever chicken bouillon you have that you like the flavor of, or whatever you have to use up. But it is important if you like the flavor of it because it's going to add a lot of the flavor in our dish. Now, because a tablespoon is 3 teaspoons, for 1.5 teaspoons, I can actually use my 1/2 tablespoon. Okay, so 1.5 teaspoons of chicken bouillon. And next I need some flour, salt, and pepper. So I need a 1/4 cup of flour. A 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And a 1/4 teaspoon of pepper as well. So now that all my dry ingredients are in there, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a jiggle, get all of those worked down in among the chicken. And then I'm going to move on to the rest of my ingredients, which is going to be vegetables. First, I'm going to add mushrooms, 3/4 cup. So I've got a 1/2 cup and a 1/4 cup. And next, I'm going to do the green bell pepper. Like I mentioned, this recipe calls for green bell pepper, Whereas a lot of recipes I've seen use peas. That's what I think of as a more classic chicken a la king, but the Betty Crocker version called for green peppers, so that's what I'm going to use. Now these green bell peppers are sliced. You can see that they're in slices. These are some that I've purchased. I have some that I've freeze-dried myself as well, but they're also in slices. And the recipe wants them to be diced. So what I'm going to do is, the great thing with freeze-dried food is you can just very easily break it up into smaller pieces. Most of the freeze-dried bell peppers I see sold commercially, I believe, are in slices. If you freeze-dry them yourself, you can do them in any shape that you want. But for me, I haven't gotten around to doing dices yet. And I think part of it is that I know I can just break the slices up into smaller pieces. So you can turn slices into dices, but you can't go back the other way. Now, another thing you could do if you're not too concerned about how they look is you could just put them into a plastic bag and kind of smash them a little bit to break them into smaller pieces. This is just a small amount, so I'm not too worried about it. So I'm just going to break them with my fingers. But if you were putting together multiple jars and you needed a lot of green bell peppers, it might be easier to do it that way. All right, so there is my 1/3 of a cup of diced green bell peppers going in the jar. And next, I'm going to be using some red bell peppers. Now, most chicken a la king recipes, or everyone I've seen, actually calls for pimento. And I'm not 100% sure what pimento even is. I thought it was just red bell pepper, but I looked it up and it's a different kind of red pepper. This is going to suffice for us. If you have a freeze dryer, you could freeze dry some jarred pimento yourself. I do have a freeze dryer. I've never gotten around to freeze drying pimento. So I'm going to use just some broken up pieces of red bell pepper, just like I did with the green bell pepper. I've never noticed a whole lot of flavor from those pimentos. It's really just a color accent. So I think this is going to be just fine. And the amount that the recipes call for is always pretty small because those jars of pimentos are really small. So I'm just going to use 1/8 of a cup of these. And just like the green bell pepper, I'm just going to break it up into smaller pieces. So here's my 2 tablespoons or 1/8 of a cup of red bell peppers diced up. Now, if you have diced red bell pepper that you've dehydrated or that you've purchased dehydrated, you could use some of that, but you'd want to probably use about half the amount, about a tablespoon, because when food is dehydrated, it does shrivel up and shrink, and freeze-dried does not. It maintains its structure, so you'd want to use less. And you'd also want to make sure when you were cooking it up that it had plenty of time to kind of soften up and come back to life, because dehydrated takes a lot longer than freeze-dried to do that. All right, so that's all the ingredients that I have for my jar. You can see that it's not entirely full. And the reason for that is that we're going to be putting a baggie with some instant rice in here so that we'll have something to serve this over if you want to serve it over rice. And because the Betty Crocker recipe didn't really include a whole lot of the chunkier, meat and vegetable ingredients. So trying to keep with that original recipe, I left my jar like this. If you don't want to include rice, you could probably do a 1.5 pint jar like this one and probably get everything into this jar. The final thing I'm going to add to this jar is going to be some instant white rice. You could use white or brown. They both come in instant. And I have here a sandwich baggie that I'm going to use to keep it separate from the rest of the contents, so it can be cooked separately and the chicken dish can be served over the rice. So I'm just going to put 1.5 cups of rice into the baggie. Now, even though this bag has a zipper, I'm not actually going to zip it. I'm just going to twist it. Actually, if I had one of those fold top sandwich baggies without the zipper, I would have used that. I don't want the rice to get in with the rest of the contents, but if I were to be putting this away for long term and adding an oxygen absorber, I'd want that oxygen absorber to be able to interact with the air that's inside of this bag as well. So that's why I'm not going to seal it. All right, so now I've got my rice inside the jar, and there is room inside the jar for an oxygen absorber if I wanted to add one, but because I'm going to be cooking this one up to show you tonight, I'm not going to add that. So I'm just going to add my lid and my band, and there is the chicken a la king meal all ready to go. So now to prepare our chicken a la king, I am going to do this all in the same pot. I'm just going to do the rice first, and then I'm going to take it out and I'm going to use the same pot to prepare the chicken mixture, which is pretty accurate to the way I'd probably want to do it if we were in an emergency. We didn't have power. We wouldn't be able to wash dishes that easily. So I'm just going to remove the rice from the jar. Now, because it's 1.5 cups of rice, I'm going to use 1.5 cups of water, and I'm just going to put it in the pan, bring it to a boil, and then I just need to stir in the rice, put on the lid, and let it set for a few minutes, and it'll be all ready. Now, if you typically would put salt or butter or anything like that on your rice, you can add some salt, some butter powder, anything you want to the bag with the rice, some chicken bouillon maybe if you would tend to cook your rice in broth. Because I'm serving something over this, I just usually do my rice plain, but that's up to you. Wow, that was fast. You can see that's already boiling. These stoves are super powerful. So I'm just gonna go ahead and stir in my rice. Whoops. And I'm gonna turn off my burner. All right, so just give that a stir and put the lid on. That's gonna set for about 5 minutes and be ready. All right, so it has been 10 minutes and our rice is just about done. It's gonna soak up a little bit more water, but it's just about done. That was actually 5 minutes. Did I say 10? But what I'm gonna do with it now, and thinking about it, I honestly could have done this as soon as it was boiling, is I have this like food thermos type of food, keeps your food warm. It's from the camping department. So I'm going to go ahead and put the rice into one of these compartments, and that will keep it warm while I cook the chicken. And then that will also allow this to keep soaking up the water. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and put this back together and set it aside. And I'm just going to go get a paper towel to wipe this out. It doesn't have to be super clean. We know what was in it. It's fine if there's a little bit of residue. Of course, if you're not in an emergency situation, you could definitely just rinse that out in the sink. So now it's time to fix up the chicken mixture portion of this. So I'm going to go ahead and empty these contents into the pan. And I'm going to go ahead and add 4 cups of water. Now remember that your mason jar is actually a really great vessel for measuring water. It's got some graduated markings on the side of it, and a quart jar is going to hold basically exactly 4 cups. So I'm going to put that in, and I'm just going to give this a stir and get this all blended together. All of these powders blended into the liquid and everything dampened by the water. And I'm going to let it set for just a few minutes before we get started with heating it. I'm going to let it set for about 5 to 10 minutes. That's going to allow some of these ingredients to start refreshing with the water before the sauce starts to thicken. And these things don't take very long to cook at all. The chicken's already cooked. The veggies, I mean, they're going to be, you could eat them as is. You could eat them, they don't need very long at all. So if you overcook them, you know, they can get like overcooked veggies. So I'm going to give this a little bit of a soak in the cold water. And if you find you need to, you could always use a whisk to break up any clumps of the sauce mixture, but I don't see anything real serious here. Okay, it has been 5 minutes. This has been setting, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat on. I'm going to lower it as much as I can with this burner. Well, I mean, not like super low, but I don't want it to come up to a boil too fast. Heating it slowly is going to allow the chicken to finish refreshing as I cook it. All right, so this has been heating slowly for 5 or 10 minutes. Now, the reason I'm heating this so slowly is partly because there are some pretty big chunks of chicken in this can of chicken that I got. So I want to make sure that those are going to fully refresh all the way through before the sauce really starts to thicken. Of course, you can also break these up if you want them smaller. If you're having trouble with them refreshing, you can break them up with your fingers before you put them in or against the side of the pot. But I don't mind the big chunks. I just wanted to make sure that they were going to get, you know, refreshed all the way through. But this is about to come to a boil, so I am going to turn it up a little bit so that it can get a good simmer and thicken this sauce. Because I think those chicken pieces are feeling pretty good, like they are about ready to go. But this can of chicken I bought has got some really big pieces, which is actually nice. I can feel this thickening up. All right, now it's starting to simmer. I'm going to be ready to turn it down so that it doesn't bubble over. I just need it to go a little bit until it thickens and cooks all that flour. And definitely stir it constantly at this point to make sure that it does not stick on the bottom. All right, so that is good. I'm going to turn that right off and just let this set for a few minutes just to come back down and cool down and thicken up a little bit more. Okay, this is just sat 10 more minutes to cool off a little bit, thicken up, and make sure that everything is fully refreshed. You can see the nice thick gravy. This looks just about perfect. I'm going to go ahead and serve some up. The rice also looks perfect. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and serve some rice. And go ahead and put some of our chicken mixture over top. And look at that. That looks amazing. And it kind of looks hot, but I am going to try it. That is really, really good. And Mr. Wicked Prepared is going to love this because he loves anything with rice. So I'm going to go let him try it. This recipe I just made was based on the recipe from the Betty Crocker website. I didn't grow up with this dish like so many people did. I don't remember my mother or my grandmother making this, but I am a recipe aficionado. I love recipes. I've been an avid reader and collector of cookbooks since my college days, long ago. So I'm very familiar with the dish. And in my mind, I always think of the classic chicken a la king as having peas instead of the green pepper. I looked up chicken a la king and I found this definition. Chicken a la king is a dish consisting of diced chicken in a cream sauce, often with sherry, mushrooms, and vegetables, generally served over rice, noodles, or bread. It was created in the late 19th century and was especially popular in the 1950s and 60s. So really, it can use many different types of vegetables along with the mushrooms, and I've seen people use all sorts of different veggies, but my preference is peas. So I decided to do a second version of this recipe like that. And now I'm going to show you how I did this version. It really illustrates just how versatile this dish is and how you can really mix and match and adapt this to your own liking and what ingredients you have on hand. All right, once again for this meal, I'm going to be using a wide mouth quart jar and my canning funnel. And I'm going to be starting again with the chicken slices. A cup of the chicken slices. And then once again, I'm going to go to putting in the sauce ingredients. So I'm going to start with butter powder. I'm using 1/8 cup of that, so 2 tablespoons. I'm going to use some instant milk powder. I'm also using 1/8 cup of that. But in addition to the instant milk powder, I'm going to be using some heavy cream powder as well. So a tablespoon of heavy cream powder. I'm going to be using some sherry wine powder. I love cooking with sherry. And classic chicken a la king often has sherry in it. I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of this. And next I am going to be using some garlic powder. 1/4 teaspoon of the garlic powder. And again, some chicken bouillon. I'm using 1 teaspoon of the chicken bouillon. And now for the flour, salt, and pepper. So I do want 1/4 cup of flour and 1/4 teaspoon of salt and 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. Now, if your pepper is very strong or if you don't like pepper, see, I have a pretty strong coarse ground pepper, and so it's making the dish taste pretty peppery, even though it's only a small amount. We like the pepper, so it doesn't bother us. But obviously with these recipes, you want to adjust all the seasonings to your family's own tastes and dietary needs. So if you don't like things as salty, or if you can't have things as salty, you can cut back on the salt or the bouillon, use a low sodium bouillon, lots of things you can do. Now, finishing up my freeze-dried ingredients, once again, I am using the red bell pepper to stand in for the pimento. So I'm going to break these up into small pieces again. And for this jar, I'm using 1/4 cup. So 1/4 cup of the diced red bell pepper. And next I'm adding my peas, freeze-dried green peas. I'm using 3/4 cup of the peas. So 1/4 cup and then another 1/2 cup. And next, I'm going to be adding my mushrooms. I'm also using 3/4 cup of the mushrooms. So 1/2 cup and 1/4 cup. And that is all that's going into this jar. You can see that pretty much fills it up, so I'm not adding rice to this jar. If you want, you could put up a separate jar of rice, a pint jar, or you could store this meal with a just add water biscuit mix or some noodles, anything you wanted to serve this over. There is room for an oxygen absorber if you're putting this meal away for longer term storage. I've had these meals last over a year with no oxygen absorber, but I'd say if you're not sure you're going to use it within a few months, it's always a safe bet to use an oxygen absorber. And here it is, our classic chicken a la king meal in a jar, all ready to go. Okay, now to fix up the second version of chicken a la king. So once again, I'm just going to empty the contents into the saucepan. I'm going to be adding 3 3/4 cups water, so just a tiny bit less than the previous recipe. And just like before, I'm just going to stir this to moisten and blend everything. And I'm going to let it set in the cold water for about 10 minutes. All right, so I'm going to let this set for 10 minutes, just like this. Okay, so now that it has been 10 minutes, I'm ready to turn the heat on. I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. And I'm going to start it on a very low heat, and I'm going to heat it really slowly. And that's going to give the chicken a chance to, get hydrated all the way through before the sauce thickens up and everything's finished. All right, this is warming slowly, and it is starting to thicken. All right, this is getting close to boiling, so I am going to turn it up a little bit now. Let it thicken the rest of the way, and then we'll turn it off and let it sit. All right, that is bubbling and thick. I'm going to turn it off so it doesn't go over. And now I'm just going to let this set, cool down, and everything to assimilate for about 10 minutes. And then we'll be ready to serve. Okay, you can see this has cooled off, thickened up a good amount, and everything's kind of assimilated into it. Smells amazing. Now, I'm going to serve this one a little bit differently just to show a different option. I like to serve them over biscuit, so I've got a leftover biscuit here that I've cut open and warmed up. And I'm going to go ahead and put some of our chicken mixture right over the biscuit. Look at that. You can see this version is a bit thicker, and that's mainly because I used slightly less water. So no matter which version you do, you can adjust that amount of water to have it the thickness that you prefer. And that might also vary depending on what base you're serving it over. If you're new to the concept of meals in a jar like these, I hope you're starting to see their magic. It's a complete shelf-stable meal that doesn't require pressure canning or any special equipment. Much tastier and healthier than canned convenience foods, tastier and healthier, and faster and easier than boxed convenience foods. They can save your tail in an emergency situation when you don't have power or refrigeration, or just an everyday situation when you just need to get supper on the table fast without falling into the fast food trap. These are just some of the many reasons that so many people love these meals in a jar. I want to circle back around to the collaboration and the prize drawing. We have some amazing prizes up for grabs, including a chamber vacuum sealer from Avid Armor, portable food warmers from Hot Logic, a chef pack from Thrive Life that is being donated by the Budget Preppers, 4 jars canning lids, Jamie from Crunchy Hippie Mama is donating an electric water kettle, all sorts of amazing prizes that you could win. This drawing is going to be held live on the Budget Preppers channel on April 6th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So head on over to the Budget Preppers channel, make sure you're subscribed over there so that you don't miss the drawing. Some prizes you have to be present to win and some you don't, but you will need to respond if you win in a certain amount of time, so be there or be square. How you enter to win is by leaving comments on the Meal in a Jar videos that are part of the collaboration. How it's going to work is for each prize, they're first going to randomly choose which video from the collaboration that they're going to choose the winner from. Then they're going to go over to that video and randomly choose one comment from that video to win the prize. So to make sure you have the best chance of winning, you're going to want to make sure that you've watched and left a comment on every single video that's part of the collaboration. The Budget Preppers have a playlist with all of the videos to make it easy for you. She's also got them all posted on her community tab, and I also have them compiled in my Meal in a Jar Facebook group. So if you haven't been following along all month, you do have about a week to catch up and get some chances to win great prizes and get some new Meal in a Jar recipes while you're at it. I'm going to leave all the links you need for that and for everything I showed in my video down below in the video description, so make sure you check that out. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me a crown emoji down in the comments. And if you missed my first collab video earlier in the month, which was crepes 2 ways, sweet and savory, just add water, mix and match, shelf-stable meal in a jar, you can check that out right here. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.